So that being said, Dan and Amélie are here for questions. We've still got some time. I noted that there was one question in the chat. I hope everybody was able to follow along. Rose from the CBDC Digby Clare had a question around support from EDC to their particular type of institution. And I saw Dan had responded to that. You just want to elaborate again on that, Dan, quickly?
Yeah, absolutely. So the way our guarantee works, unfortunately, we can only actually deploy it with charter banks, the big five that everyone knows, and credit unions. But with CBDC, we can still collaborate insofar as we're happy to have conversations, brainstorm, figure out what might be on the table for the client in terms of, financing package. So we're still happy to be a collaborative kind of resource, but unfortunately, we can't use the guarantee on any CBDC term lending, which is a limitation of the guarantee program. But still happy. Sometimes what we've done is, collaborated with the charter bank for an operating line, and then CBDC has done a piece of term debt on the side. So the client is still a CBDC customer, still a big five bank customer, and EDC is in the background helping the charter bank, but the client is still kind of using both service providers. So we're still happy to collaborate, but unfortunately we can't physically use the guarantee with a CBDC.
Thanks, Dan. And you might have just all noted, I have ticked on asking you to unmute your mics. That just enables you, if you have questions, to be able to unmute your microphone. You can also send questions via the chat. And if you missed that request for the unmuting, just either wave your hand or send us a chat, and we'll unmute you if you have additional questions. So out to the group, any additional questions that you have top of mind? Jeannot?
Yes, good morning. First of all, Amélie and Dan, very nice presentation. I really appreciate it, and I learned stuff, so that's good. Two-part question. First of all, Dan, since you started off, I'm kind of curious as to the relative cost of insurance as part of the package you offer customers.
Yeah, absolutely.
Elaborate a bit on that.
For sure. So the insurance is an interesting product because our lens is exclusively on the international client. So it's all about the risk profile of who you're actually selling to. It doesn't have much to do with the Canadian company here at home. So the big things that would drive the pricing are obviously the credit term. Is the Canadian customer giving their client 30 days to pay, 60 days to pay, 90 days to pay? The longer the period, obviously, the riskier it gets, since a whole heck of a lot can happen right in 90 days in this environment. As well, the volume, are we insuring $10,000? Are we insuring $1 million? That plays into it. The market, of course, we know there's certain markets that are safer to sell into than other markets, and industry is a big one as well. We have all these stats that suggest there's certain industries that have a higher frequency of default than others. So those kind of all go into a big pot. So generally speaking, the insurance can be as cheap as 10 basis points, kind of at the low end, but it could be as high as 1.1, 1.2% as well, relative to what's being insured, kind of the top line. So normally what we try to do is get the client a quote relatively early on, so they're not offended by the number, or if they are offended by the number, obviously we can rework things or perhaps find a different solution. So we are very transparent on, look, here's what's going to run you, here are the costs, but here are the benefits. And what even some clients do, they use the insurance, if you can believe it, as more of a business development tool. They know if they're in a competitive situation, they're trying to sell to someone abroad, but they know there's a company from the UK trying to win their business. There's a company from Australia maybe bidding. Canadian client can sometimes say, well, look, I know all my competitors are asking for advance payments. I'll give this client 60 days to pay, and maybe that'll win their business. Maybe that'll be enough for them to choose me, my Canadian company. And in the background, I'll take out the EC insurance, so I know I'm covered if there is an event of default. But so the pricing can vary greatly depending on all those factors, but that's kind of generally speaking what we look at.
Great, thanks. Second part of my question, Amélie, très bonne présentation. Pendant que j'écoutais, je ne pouvais pas m'empêcher de penser à l'actualité dans le climat politique américain et comment nous, les Canadiens, surtout dans vos bureaux, comment vous percevez l'avenir proche et moyen des activités d'importation et d'exportation avec nos voisins?
Très bonne question. Effectivement, tout à fait lié avec l'actualité, mais nous, ce qu'on revient toujours à dire quand on reçoit ces questions-là, c'est que les liens sont tellement, tellement étroits sur le terrain. C'est ce qui se passe, puis qu'on entend dans les nouvelles, mais sur le terrain, dans plein de domaines, les chaînes d'approvisionnement sont tellement interreliées. Que c'est difficile, je parlais de changer la chaîne d'approvisionnement, mais c'est difficile de faire ça, spécialement dans certains secteurs, vu le fait que le Canada et les États-Unis sont près quand même géographiquement aussi. Donc, nous, on voit ça comme positif. Puis, on n'est pas inquiet, étant donné les liens étroits, puis les relations qui sont très, très proches. Je parlais des délégués commerciaux, ils ont quand même 16 représentations partout aux États-Unis. Donc, c'est des gens à tous les jours qui sont là à faire des liens puis à présenter nos compagnies canadiennes. Donc, nous, on voit ça, comme je disais, positif et avec des nouvelles opportunités, mais il faut s'assurer que nos compagnies canadiennes sachent que ça existe pour que la machine embarque et que ces gens-là qui sont sur le terrain pour nous et nos entreprises puissent connaître les entreprises où, quand il y a un fit, et les présentent et les mettre de l'avant devant les compagnies qui vont acheter, qui sont américaines.
Merci.
Alors, autre question? Alain?
Yes, thank you, Amélie and Dan, for the very informative presentation. I'm going to pose my question in English because it's open to both of you. But I deal with many clients, and I noticed in the knowledge and advice or the market information components of EDC, you could find information. Now, let's say down this area we had a very large mink industry, and mink being an animal product and possibly not accepted ever in the world product pose problems. So if someone wanted to export either a fur or oil or mink byproduct to Europe, for example, is there any way to get requirements, certifications, permits, whatever is required to export to specific countries within Europe? Is that something you guys provide? And if so, is there a timeline or cost to these services?
Yeah, very good question, Alain. Thank you. So I think I'll take it then. But if I take Europe, let's say, as an example, because you mentioned that in your question. So every product that's exported abroad has an HS code attached to it. And Europe has a tool that's really great where you input where you want to be importing from, because if it's from a European perspective, so you'd be importing from Canada to which European country, let's say, and then you add your HS code, and they have all of the requirements showing up on there, as well as duties if it's not duty free, because of the origin, let's say, but we have a free trade agreement, so most likely it could be duty free. So it's something we could share with the company. It usually, so we can share all of that after. I think we could ask Andre to circle that around, but we have a page online where companies can reach out to us. So they'll add a bit of information on who their company is and what's the product and what's their question. And so it's completely free. Our team usually needs between, I'd say, 5 to 7 business days to get back to the company, just because we've seen a huge increase in number of questions coming to us lately. But definitely, the answer is yes.
Thank you.
I see a question from Rose.
Yes, thank you to both Dan and Amélie for the presentation. I'm going to go back to my CBDC question. It's really good to know that the EDC is there, because it's not very often we meet with clients that are trying to export, because we focus really on, most of them are small businesses, tradespeople who, but once in a while we'll have a one-off that'll come in and it's like, I don't know what to do with these people. So I'm really grateful that you guys shared the information that, if we can collaborate in some sort of way, that I can refer them to you guys or just begin the conversation. So that's really good. I may have missed this, but there was, the statistics that you provided today were really interesting. And I really enjoyed the comment about how that the clothing and what, we've noticed how the clothing has changed in some sort of way, or the style, but I never even thought that I just thought people just got cozy and comfortable and just, work from home. But there has been a big impact in that industry. But the statistics that you're providing, you have the stats till October. Are we going to continue seeing that as the pandemic, we're at a point where we're still in it for some time. When's the next kind of round of data that's going to come out?
Yeah, thanks, Rose. That's a really good question. That's something our internal teams involved in this. So that was a huge commitment from their ends to get all of that data together. And I think they're thinking about it right now, because we never know, when we, like, I think Dan mentioned it earlier, when this started, we were like, okay, let's go and ask companies, but we didn't even know we would go back to them back in May or June. So we're looking at how things are going, but we might do another round, but I don't know at this point when it would be and if it will happen, but I know they're thinking about it.
Okay, thank you guys. It was very interesting.
Thank you.
Well,
Thank you.
others maybe think of a final question maybe they have on their mind. Maybe I could toss two things out there. And Dan, first to you. We often talk also about how we had to adapt as an organization within COVID. Within the pandemic times. And maybe I could ask you, from your perspective at EDC, what are the things that happened that were dramatically different from day one to day two when we were really immersed into the pandemic from your work environment? And Amélie, maybe a question for you while Dan's answering that one and thinking about it. A question for you. Some of the data that you shared was really relevant in respect to the digitization of certain things or the online presence. And maybe you could share some thoughts about what you've seen in those discussions, because our small business owners in rural communities are sometimes afraid of going towards that online presence or don't have the capability or tools, et cetera. And is there anything that you can share from that perspective, I guess? So Dan, over to you for the first one.
Yeah, so it's funny thinking back to March when this all started. Initially, we had two teams, I think a team blue and a team red, and we're going to switch in and out of the office, obviously, to limit capacity. But we quickly scrapped that and everyone went to working from home. And a lot of folks still are, honestly. I'm in the office, as you may be able to see my beautiful background here. But really, like all our clients, like all our prospects, we moved kind of to an entirely virtual world, lots of Zoom meetings, MS Teams, WebEx, you name it. And something we continue to do this day. And I think really kind of how we stay connected as a team, we had basically touch points every other day where we connect virtually with our team. We tried to have our cameras on so everyone was engaged, opposed to kind of just having cameras off and dozing off in the background. So my boss was really good at kind of setting that up, and we kept that discipline throughout, the fall months and into the winter here now. So really found we're all in the same boat. Our clients are in the same boat as well. So I guess the silver lining has been I found it's much easier to stack meetings. There's no more commuting, right? So you can book a 1 o'clock meeting, a 1:30 meeting, a 2 meeting. You get tired eventually, obviously. But previously, I'd have to hop in a car and run over to Dartmouth or, run over to Hammonds Plains. And I can kind of stack all my meetings. So it's a little more efficient in that way. But I certainly do miss the face-to-face, the shaking of hands, the grabbing a coffee at Tim's with somebody. It's been a long time since we've been able to do that. But like I said, I think we're all in the same boat here. So we're doing much the same at EDC that you folks will be doing on the line here. So hopefully we do see the finish line eventually and can get back to a normal here eventually.
Thanks for sharing that, Dan, because you highlight one thing that we often talk about also is that it seems the business world relationships are built in an easier fashion face-to-face with that human contact. And the virtual is a new way for us to certainly adapt. And it is another thing that was shared in the data, taking advantage of exploring markets that you would have never considered because of the costs. The virtual world is the way you can do it now as we become more comfortable with these methods. And it'll be, I think, critically important that we figure out how to create that relationship that we used to in the I guess presential world where we were present. So Amélie, over to you for that second part of that question that I had.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, André. So very good question. A question I get asked probably weekly because I know EDC is seen sometimes as helping bigger companies. We help companies of all sizes. Most of the companies that come to us are small businesses. We get often companies that don't even have $1 million in sales. And it's interesting to see right now with COVID, some of the questions they ask, no matter the size, are really often related, and digitization, e-commerce comes back really often. So yes, there are plenty of tools to help companies. They don't have to do all on their own anymore, and that's the good thing. If you think of platforms such as Shopify, we see more and more companies using Shopify. They have a step-by-step process on how you can open a shop online, and for payments, and they have the answer all of those questions. But if a company wants to do it on their own, or they want to know about options, we have information on what are the key platforms to help you start a business, the pros and cons. BDC has great tools as well. They have that, it's a free website assessment tool, which I find really cool. You enter, let's say, www.edc.ca, you press go, and quickly it's going to analyze your website and tell you some of your strengths and weaknesses for free. Like, of course, it's a really quick overview, but it gets you thinking of what are the things you could look at. They also have an article that I'm thinking about where they give you the quick and free tools you can use, like Google Analytics, just to track who's visiting your website. Because what we've been seeing is that with the pandemic, like, companies have been getting requests from companies outside of Canada. So they started exporting because people got to them without them reaching out to them with e-commerce. That's the beauty of it, right? So at least you can track that and see who seems interested. So that can help you start thinking of a strategy of, oh, where does my product seems to have potential? So we have guides as well on the step-by-step of e-commerce, really to get companies thinking, and at least for them to understand what it means to have an e-commerce platform and the costs of it, so that they can plan ahead, so that they don't get surprises at the end. But it's all possible. It's no matter the size.
Well, thank you both. We have, I guess, an opportunity for one final question if somebody does have one, and if not, we'll close the session. So I'll give you a moment if somebody has one final question.
I would probably have one. Oh, Alain, go ahead.
I just saw a finger go up there.
I just had a quick question. That you indicated how there's a reduction in exports over the last few months due to COVID. Do you know what sectors these reductions were in? Were they, like, I know we export a lot of seafood in Canada and stuff like that. Do you know what sectors were primarily impacted?
So we've tracked sectors as a whole, like I said at the beginning. So we saw oil and gas was impacted as a good example. Seafood, everything that was food related, not as impacted, because people kept eating, and some of them bought more, like they were eating at home all the time, right? Not necessarily in restaurants anymore. So all food related overall, based on what we saw, was pretty, did pretty good. But it's mostly things like arts, entertainment, tourism, where, and I mean, still today, it's hard, right? People are at home. So, so that's mostly those sectors, I would say.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And again, thanks, Dan. Thanks, Amélie. The beginning of a great relationship, I think, with the folks we have on the screen. We'll look forward to hopefully chatting with you in the near future also, with maybe opportunities for your services within our communities. And we know which door to knock on virtually in respect to some very pertinent information that relates to expanding into export markets. So thanks again for your participation in our series, and I hope you all have a terrific day.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.